By the 12th century BC, Egypt had already witnessed centuries of change. Its vast temple complexes and monumental pyramids stood like silent giants in the desert, overshadowing the land that had once known kings who ruled with absolute power over a civilization whose glory seemed timeless. These colossal structures were more than just architectural feats. They were monuments to the kings of Egypt, whose reigns stretched back over 1,000 years. But these structures, symbols of power and permanence, were also relics of an era long past. Egypt had endured turmoil, both from within and without. Foreign invasions, civil unrest, and a period of darkness that had threatened to swallow the once great nation whole. In the intervening centuries, Egypt had faced the ravages of time. The world around it had changed dramatically. The great edifice of Egyptian society had withstood foreign invasions, dynastic upheavals, and what could only be described as a dark age. Yet by the time of the 12th century BC, Egypt was still a formidable power. The same gods still ruled the land, and the culture, though evolving, remained largely unchanged. However, Egypt's once unquestioned dominance over the ancient world was slipping. Egypt, once self-sufficient and insular, was now part of a vast and interconnected trade network that spanned the entire Mediterranean world. Egypt no longer existed in isolation. By the 12th century BC, Egypt had become one piece of a much larger puzzle, an intricate web of trade and diplomacy that stretched all the way from the southern shores of Britain to the farthest reaches of Afghanistan. The wealth and stability of the ancient world's interconnected system had never been more apparent. It was a system that spanned continents, and its influence reached into nearly every corner of the known world. This period marked the pinnacle of Egyptian power, yet it was also the beginning of its slow and inevitable decline. Before we go any further, I'd like to ask you something simple. Where are you listening from right now, not only on the map, but within your day? Are you settling down after hours that felt a little too full, or easing into rest earlier than usual? And what time is it where you are? It feels right to ask because the story we're about to enter exists beyond our usual sense of time. The world we're exploring tonight doesn't follow clocks or calendars. It unfolds across stretches so vast they hardly seem to move at all. If this space feels calming to you, or if gentle science helps your thoughts relax their hold, you're always welcome to like the video. Subscribe to stay tuned, and at the end, share your thoughts in the comment. It simply helps this quiet corner reach others who may also be looking for something steady and unhurried to listen to, though there's never any rush here. Now let's begin gently as we dive back into the Sea Peoples and the late Bronze Age collapse. From as early as the 15th century BC, Egypt's kings had been in constant communication with the great rulers of the day. A vast library of diplomatic letters, nearly 300 cuneiform tablets found in the ancient city of Amarna, reveals the extent of these interactions. The letters, written in Akkadian and Babylonian, were the lingua franca of the day and show that the kings of Egypt were in regular contact with their counterparts in Anatolia, Mesopotamia, and even as far as the distant shores of Britain. They corresponded on matters of trade, diplomacy, and sometimes war. These diplomatic missives sent across the ancient world show how deeply Egypt was intertwined in a global network. However, by the 12th century BC, Egypt was beginning to feel the strain of this interconnected world. An unsettling shift was in the air. The great powers of the ancient world, which had thrived for centuries, were now facing threats from every direction. Reports of famine from Hatti, destruction in Greece, and the gradual erosion of the once mighty Mycenaean palaces began to filter into Egypt. The same system that had brought prosperity to Egypt was now starting to unravel, and Egypt could no longer stand alone. Its economic and military might had been built on a fragile foundation that was now beginning to crack. Ramesses III, the last great pharaoh of the New Kingdom, found himself at the heart of this unraveling. As Egypt's political and military might began to wane, he was forced to confront a new and unprecedented threat. Black sails were sighted off the Egyptian coast in 1177 BC, signaling the arrival of a new enemy, a fleet of sleek, warlike vessels that glided swiftly up the Nile River. These invaders came with plunder on their minds and destruction in their wake. The pharaoh's response was swift and resolute. Ramesses III, ever the statesman, recorded his victory in grand frescoes at Medinet Habu, inscribing the events for future generations to behold. This victory, one of Egypt's last great military triumphs, was depicted on a massive scale, depicting not only the battle, but the invaders themselves. The frescoes show the invaders, diverse, uncivilized warriors wearing horned helmets, feathered headdresses, and an array of mismatched armor. Some of them were heavily armored, while others were lightly clothed or even shirtless. What they all shared was a singular purpose: to destroy the world that Egypt had long known. The Sea Peoples, as we now know them, were a confederation of various tribes and peoples united by a common goal: to bring down the established powers of the ancient world. Who were these mysterious invaders? Where did they come from? The truth, as with so much of history, remains elusive. But we know this. They were not merely a band of marauding pirates. They were a force of destruction that tore through the ancient world with a singular, brutal purpose. The Sea Peoples, whose names were recorded by the Egyptians, Peliset, Jekka, Danuna, and Weshesh, were the agents of the late Bronze Age collapse, a cataclysmic event that left the ancient world in ruins. The exact identity of these peoples remains a mystery. Were they mercenaries fleeing from a world in collapse? Were they refugees, displaced by famine, drought, and war? Or were they simply opportunists, seizing their chance to destroy the crumbling powers of the ancient world? Whatever their origin, the Sea Peoples had a profound impact on Egypt. They were one of the many causes of the collapse of the ancient world, yet they were also a symptom of something much larger. In the centuries leading up to the 12th century BC, the world had been increasingly destabilized by famine, drought, and environmental disasters. The interconnected trade systems that had once brought prosperity to Egypt were now crumbling, and with it the great powers of the Bronze Age. Ramesses III's victory over the Sea Peoples was one of his last acts as pharaoh. Though he defeated the invaders, his empire was already in decline. His victory would not be enough to stop the inevitable collapse. The great cities of Egypt, once teeming with life and power, would slowly fade into obscurity. The monumental structures that had once represented Egypt's dominance over the ancient world would become nothing more than decaying ruins, relics of a civilization on the brink of collapse. But Egypt was not alone in its downfall. The Sea Peoples were not the only force responsible for the collapse of the ancient world. Evidence suggests that the great empires of the Mediterranean were all slowly falling apart at the same time. The Mycenaean cities were burned to the ground, and the once powerful Hittite Empire crumbled under the weight of internal strife and external invasion. The collapse of these great civilizations set off a chain reaction, toppling one power after another. The Sea Peoples were merely a part of this larger catastrophe. They were a force that capitalized on the chaos of the time, sweeping through the ancient world like a tidal wave. Yet, despite their brutal conquests, the Sea Peoples did not live in isolation. They were part of a larger, more complex system of migration, warfare, and cultural exchange. As the world of the Bronze Age crumbled, new powers emerged in the aftermath of the destruction. These new civilizations, forged in the fires of the collapse, would rise from the ashes of the old world. Yet the collapse of the Bronze Age marked the end of an era. The age of the great palaces, the chariots and the kings who ruled the known world, was over, and with it, a new world was born, one of smaller, more fragmented kingdoms and new powers, the rise of the Iron Age. The Sea Peoples, though their identities and origins remain shrouded in mystery, left an indelible mark on history. They were not just invaders. They were the last great wave that swept across the ancient world, signaling the end of the Bronze Age and the beginning of a new, uncertain age. Join the conversation. Comment below with your thoughts, share this video with fellow history enthusiasts, and help us uncover the truths buried beneath centuries of forgotten time. The past is waiting to be rediscovered. Let's uncover it together.